Um, we are live on YouTube. We're going to get started. I'm going to mute everybody. Okay, and we're going to, and can we record? Can you record? We are live on YouTube. Oops, let me turn this off. There we go.
Oh, Melanie, could you make me co-host? I can't record until I'm made co-host. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay.
No worries.
I have to, let's see, where are you? Oh, here you are. Co-host, yes. Okay. All right. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on August 12th. Today we have a very exciting program for you. We will be focusing on advocacy. To start off, we have a keynote greeting from Congresswoman Judy Chu. Judy Chu is from the 27th District of California, and Congresswoman Chu was one of the first Chinese American women who was elected to Congress, and she currently serves as the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. And so she will speak through a recorded message to us about issues impacting the API community today. Following her speech, Vice President of Civic Public Affairs, Ted Gong, and Vice President of Membership, Ken Hui from San Antonio, will be engaging the audience in a discussion about some of the issues that impact us today. Kalani, can you start the video? Rusty.
Oh, yes. Did you want me to also pause the recording or?
Oh, no, just go ahead. You can just start the video.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. No sound.
Huh? I'm sorry, can you see the video?
Yeah, but we don't hear anything.
Oh, sorry, let me fix that.
Okay.
Sorry, one moment.
That's okay.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, and as the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or what we call KPAC, I'm thrilled to be a part of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance first ever virtual convention. For years now, I've been proud to partner with you in support of the Chinese American community, standing up for our rights, celebrating our contributions. And that includes fighting to recognize the incredible Chinese Americans who signed up to serve our country during World War II. Even in the face of the historically discriminatory Chinese Exclusion Act, these patriots signed up to serve because they believed in the promise of this country. That is why for years we fought in Congress to honor the service of these brave Chinese Americans. And finally, in 2018, with your help, Congress passed the bill to award the nation's highest civilian honor, the Congressional Gold Medal, to the Chinese American veterans of World War II. So thank you for your work in helping to celebrate such noble service to our country. And that is why I am also so glad that you are able to host your first virtual conference to bring us all together, because today's conversation could not be coming at a more important time for the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. Since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, there have been over 7,500 anti-Asian hate incidents, many fatal. But it was not until the horrific murders of 6 Asian women at 3 Asian-owned spas in Georgia that the country was shocked awake to the reality of anti-Asian violence. The horrendous surge of anti-Asian hate crimes finally resulted in a bipartisan show of support that led to the passage of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act that will help us better track and respond to hate crimes. But while we finally have an administration that is willing to get serious about hate crimes, our community is facing a growing threat of more violence and prejudice because of a renewed political focus on China. In fact, there is even an initiative called the China Initiative, which has led to greater racial profiling from our own government. The China Initiative, an effort to stop Chinese espionage in American scientific research, is unique among Department of Justice or DOJ investigations. Whereas most investigations start with a crime and then find a suspect, this initiative starts with a suspect and then searches for a crime. Just family ties to China or even professionally encouraged research and collaboration can be enough to trigger an investigation. In fact, this initiative stands out as one of the only Department of Justice efforts named for a specific country. And so, as a result, simply doing research while Chinese could be enough to have your life and career ruined by a criminal conviction. This is more commonly known as racial profiling. This has real consequences for the way these investigations play out, with chilling effects for both the Chinese American community and our country as a whole. First, by looking specifically at Chinese scientists, we might be missing real instances of espionage from other countries. As former CIA Director Robert Gates said, there are probably a dozen or 15 countries that steal our technology, but only one country, China, has been deemed to require what FBI Director Christopher Wray called a whole of society response. This is the exact kind of language that leads to widespread mistrust of Chinese Americans. Second, this initiative prioritizes convictions, not justice. And that has too often meant bringing a case without sufficient grounds, something that has ruined the lives of people like Dr. An Ming-hu. Born in China, Dr. Hu attained a PhD in laser physics in Canada, where he also gained citizenship. In 2013, he was hired by the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where he applied for permanent U.S. citizenship and was promoted thanks to his excellent work. But to the DOJ, the only part of his resume that mattered was his affiliation with China. And in February 2020, Dr. Hu was arrested for espionage. This was the first case under the China Initiative to go to trial, and the results are telling. It turns out that in a year and a half of undercover surveillance of Dr. Hu, the FBI uncovered no evidence of espionage. Instead, all they found was a paperwork error related to university-approved summer work with a Chinese university. This was a recording mistake, not espionage. And during the trial, one of the FBI agents admitted that his PowerPoint presentation to the university that claimed Dr. Hu had ties to the Chinese military was based on falsified information. The lack of any evidence and the testimony that the evidence they did have was false resulted in a mistrial. But the damage was already done. On the weight of the FBI's false evidence, Dr. Hu lost his job and his reputation and blew through his savings to pay his legal fees. And the suspicion, isolation, and fear took a great emotional toll on him and his family. His son David, who was studying at the university where his father taught, immediately questioned his future in computer science and ultimately was forced to return to Canada. He reflects the many Chinese American students who are now afraid to enter STEM fields, conduct research, or collaborate with Chinese partners out of fear their lives could be ruined next. And we just heard that the Justice Department is going to retry Dr. Hu. I am outraged and issued a statement against this. We are scheduling a meeting with U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland and will present our concerns about this action and all these cases. This fear was made worse by a shocking revelation in a recent Senate report. It found that there was a rogue unit at the Department of Commerce that had been operating for a decade without any authority, opening up investigations on 2,000 employees, mostly Asian Americans, based only on their ethnicity. Called the Investigations and Threat Management Service, this unit took on law enforcement activities that treated these employees as national security threats without cause or notification. Not only were these investigations unjustified and flawed, they failed to uncover any national security threats despite the thousands of investigations that were opened and the numerous lives ruined, including that of Sherry Chen. According to whistleblowers, constitutional protections for Asian Americans were regularly ignored in search of proof to justify improperly started investigations. We in CAPAC have called for the disbanding of this unit and met with Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo. Thankfully, Secretary Raimondo was very responsive. She's already investigating it, having already taken action to suspend their activities. She said she will either disband the unit or substantially change it. Today, our big challenge is how we fight back. First of all, we need to make more Americans aware of this government-led racial profiling. That is what Representative Jamie Raskin and I did just last month when we hosted a House Oversight Committee roundtable discussion for members of Congress to hear from experts, former FBI agents, and researchers who had their lives upended by these investigations. Also, in the coming days, I will be sending a letter to an independent investigator, the DOJ Inspector General, about the alleged FBI misconduct in the Doctor Who case. But more must be done. That can start with halting the China initiative. This initiative was flawed from the start by focusing on ethnicity over crime, which is why what happened to Doctor Who is not an exception. In fact, just this week, the DOJ announced that they were dropping charges against 5 more Chinese scientists, again without explanation, despite the harm already done. Ties to China alone cannot be the basis for an investigation that can ruin one's life. Second, we should stop the Cold War rhetoric. When the Chinese government acts against our interests or values, we can and must speak out. But we need to be deliberate in what and who we criticize. It should be those who are responsible, not all Chinese people. And we can't let fear become an excuse to rob Chinese Americans of their civil liberties. There are still those alive today who were forced into U.S. prison camps during World War II because it was believed that just being Japanese American made them untrustworthy and spies. This policy was wrong then, and a policy of mass suspicion is wrong today. That is why this month I and our CAPAC leadership sent guidance to every member of Congress on how to speak out against China's policies without stoking xenophobia here. That means not spreading unfounded suspicions that paint all Chinese people as threats and which put innocent Chinese Americans at risk. Fighting this will take all of us working together. So I look forward to working with you on this and so many issues to ensure this continues to be an inclusive America where everybody is treated equally. Thank you.
Ken and Ted, your thoughts?
Yeah, I hope that what we can do now is just have a conversation. Hoping you guys could just raise your hands or just unmute yourself and just start talking about what was it about what Congressman Chu said that resonates with you, and some of the things that and just have a conversation. I think that one of the issues that really faces is that China U.S.-China relationships and tensions is going to grow regardless of who's in power and what's going on now. That tension is going to increase. And from there, there's always the risk that there will be a fallout on us Chinese Americans. The idea of a Vincent Chin case is going to always be there as an example in which people's, in that case, of course, everybody remembers, were prejudice or concern about the U.S.-Japan relationship resulted in people fearing Japanese or losing jobs because of economic competition. And then people wrongfully accusing people that look Asian. In this case, Vincent Chin was Chinese, of being Japanese responsible for their unemployment and resulted in his death. So that's one of the things that sort of sticks up in my mind about some of the things that she's talked about. So what I'm going to do also is that I do, she mentioned, Judy Chu mentioned that she had written guidance, she and Jamie Raskin had written guidance that they were going to pass to the Congress and various peoples to speak to that issue. How do you address real concerns or real issues that would reflect upon potential espionage or other threats from different countries, in this case China, without stoking anti-Chinese Chinese xenophobia? So what I'll do is I'll put that into the chat function, the linkage to that. It's quite useful. It's very down to earth. It says, instead of calling the Chinese enemy threatening us on the South China Seas, you might want to say something like the Chinese military, so that it's not really linked to a people or ethnicity. So I'll add that onto the chat line. It's a link that you could download, and it's something that's useful for you in your lodges or your talks to press, or how you yourself frame the words. Ken, I want to go over to you, as other people may be formulating questions. What was it that resonated to you about what Congresswoman Chu said?
Yeah, thank you, Ted. So this is Representative Chu, she gave a really good presentation on really things that have been, kind of been in back of my mind, right? So number one, we all need to recognize that the espionage threat from China is real. It's very intensive, and it is bigger than anything that we have seen in a very, very long time. So, but what she said was she talked about the Justice Department's China initiative. So, is this, was this, I think there is probably well-founded reasons for doing it, but in the implementation, I don't think, I'm pretty sure that that's not what we need to do. So again, so she talks about the China initiative, and please go on the DOJ website and look up the China initiative, and they did a pretty good job of explaining what it's about, and they listed a whole bunch of cases that they had identified as a result of this initiative. But the main takeaway for me is, if my neighbors are racist, I can deal with that. If a business is racist and they profile me, I can deal with that. But when a government conducts racial profiling, there is no way as an individual for me to fight back. And now we have to collectively, as a group and with our legislators, push back on that. So again, China initiative, racially profiling, yeah, it sure looks like it, right? So we definitely need to have the DOJ, have the IG go back and look at this case, and look at how we're doing that. Then she talks about the Commerce Department opening up investigations of their own employees, 2,000 cases, I believe. And I don't believe that the Department of Commerce has Title 18 authority. So again, the legality of that is highly questionable. So, but again, all of us, and Ted, you and I are longtime govies. So I'm sure you've had experiences with racial profiling and instances where you felt that you were prejudiced because of your race. So, but again, when a department does that specifically, definitely that needs to be brought out, and then that needs to be aired out, and that needs to be investigated. Because again, I don't believe the Department of Commerce has Title 18 authority. And, I talked to one of my security guys when I was still working for the Air Force. And in a conversation, he goes, Ken, there's nothing to worry about, talking to the cops, except when they reach your rights. It's like, that's when you need to shut up. So,
Hey,
but
Ken,
anyway, yeah.
Ken, can you just briefly explain what you mean when you say Title 18 authority?
Title 18 is criminal acts, right? So again, you can't, Title 18 is what the FBI and all the other law enforcement agencies operate within those statutes. Okay, so those are criminal statutes, whereas all these different titles within the Constitution, that's different areas of operations for the government.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the main thing for me when my security guy told me was nothing to worry about until they read you your rights. It's like, yes, absolutely true. And then the last thing that, my takeaway is when Representative Chu talked about the big challenge, how do we fight back? And that's so important, because again, we can complain all we want, but if we take no action, then nothing will happen, right? So we need to make other Americans aware that there is government-led racial profiling. And this is not new. Judy Chu talked about what happened to the Japanese Americans during World War II. Innocent people were interned. Wow. And we said, never again. Well, guess what? It's happening again. So we need to collectively take action. And when she said to have the DOJ look into the misconduct by the FBI, oh, definitely. When the power of the government is put upon you, even if you're innocent, they will ruin you because you need to hire lawyers. Yeah. And, not everybody is like a Jeff Bezos that can hire armies of lawyers, right? And you look at the Sherry Chen case, right? What happened to her? Innocent, but what happened to her, life savings? Gone. Doctor Who, innocent? Yeah, most likely. And what happened to his life savings? Gone. So, and I think it's impingent upon organizations like ours to really make the effort to see how we can get involved. And if it's, prudent, then we should be part of that process to help defend some of these folks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
again, the last
ahead.
thing, a couple of things was we need to halt the China initiative, and that's definitely true. We need to at least review what's going on and see what basis we have to continue with it. And then, Cold War rhetoric, I think politicians do that to really stir the population. But again, and I think Ted can attest to this too, is that, espionage is going on for as long as we know. But the espionage from China is a very, very, it's a big threat to not just our DoD military, but also to the industry. All right.
Again, I want to encourage everyone to sort of like speak up or say something. You might have some opinions about things that are going on or what you think about what's happening. So I do want to encourage that. So raise your hand, or I don't know if it's okay to just unmute and just say.
I think we have Joseph Miller.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I am one of the I'm in a unique position, both being politically active in Nevada. I'm with the Las Vegas Lodge. I'm the president of the Las Vegas Lodge, and I'd like to add on to what Brother Hui said out of San Antonio, in particular when it comes to being questioned or investigated by any authorities or any investigators. First off, we're under the impression that we can speak freely until we've been read our rights. The problem with that, in my legal experience and in personal experience being investigated, I've been investigated and interrogated numerous times over the last 10-year period, more so in the last 4 years as I've gotten more politically engaged in our community here in Nevada and running for public office. One of the things that people don't understand is that while we are all taught, and even if you didn't go to law school, we know, hey, they're going to say you have the right to remain silent and anything you say. That is only when they read you those rights. That's only after you're being detained and arrested. If they're reading you those rights, you're being arrested. So most people tend to think that they can, hey, I'm going to be honest. I've got nothing to do with this. I'm going to go ahead and answer their questions. They haven't read me my rights. But the problem with that is this. An investigator, and more specifically a federal investigator, they don't have to tell you the truth when they're investigating. When they question you, I'll give you a prime example. When they question you and they may come to you and say, listen, I want to ask you some questions about John Doe, and it's not even you. And they ask you a bunch of questions. They don't have to tell you that they're investigating you. They don't have to tell you who they're investigating. And in fact, they can tell you they're investigating someone else and it not be true. Many people, and I've seen this in my firm, in my office, I'm the chief strategist, which is like the quarterback of the firm. I've seen it happen multiple times where investigators or local authorities will question an individual, whether it be a suspect or a witness, and not tell them the whole truth, or not tell them any truth for that matter, later only to come back and place them under arrest and then read them their rights. And then when you find later during preliminary investigations, preliminary hearings, you find that the information that you'd given them prior to you being read your rights is being used against you. However innocuous it may seem, when you make a simple statement, like, with the first question you're going to be asked is, what's your name? Spell your name. Where were you born? What's your profession? Did you graduate from here? What was your grade? I mean, the questions seem like, how could they be harmful? Here's where the problem comes in. When you either fail to remember accurately and give an incorrect answer, during an investigation, you can then be charged, and often are charged, with lying to a federal investigator. Now, why is that important to mention? Well, it's the importance of that is this. Usually, if you look back in history, and I'll bring up our previous president and the administration, multiple people around the previous administration, around the president, were arrested and questioned. And multiple people were arrested and charged with lying to authorities. Notice, they were rarely, if ever, charged with what the media or what it was portrayed they were going after. The reason for that is because the evidence wasn't there. And so you'd have one of the former president's lawyers was arrested and convicted of lying to a federal investigator. Most people would think that he was lying about President Trump, when in reality, he lied about things such as, had you had an affair? Do you have a girlfriend? Things like that. Then they came back later and they would charge you with that. Use that because, as you know, you got to pay lawyers tens of thousands of dollars, go through your savings, wondering why you're being charged with something, but it's being used as leverage to possibly either get you to say something that you don't believe to be true, or that you don't even really have any information about, but only to get yourself out of the situation that you're in for something that you thought was innocuous. So my advice, and seek legal competent counsel in your jurisdictions, in your cities, in your towns. My information is that you say nothing. If an investigator were to ask you any questions just out of the blue, knock on your door, and you've done nothing wrong, all the more reason to say, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions once I have a lawyer present. Why? Because any little thing that you say to them that is even slightly off kilter will be used and enough evidence, sufficient evidence, to charge you with lying to an investigator, which then you spend a year, 2 or 3 fighting. Even if you get out of it, you're broke. So that's what I wanted to point out. And Ken, so that statement of, yeah, go ahead and talk to them until they read you right. Wrong answer. Never, ever, and I can't say this hardly enough, ever talk to an investigator for any reason, no matter how innocent you are, and simply just say, I'd be more than happy to answer all of your questions once I have an attorney present. 9 out of 10 times, they will not come back to you and ask you any more questions, and you will not have given them anything to even charge you with that had nothing to do with what they were investigating.
So we're coming to the end of the hour, and but I do want to give anybody else who might have some comments a chance to say something, and then I do want to add a couple of comments to what our brother from Las Vegas has said, and also what Ken has said. Any other thoughts as we're going into this? Yeah. So one of the things I like to say is that it's not necessarily the charge that is a problem. For example, many of the scientists, and Ken knows this so well, that our ability to do any of their work depends on our security clearance. If anybody approaches you, whether they charge or ask questions, it's not necessary that they do anything. They just sort of lift your security clearance. If that happens, that's the end of your career, depending upon what your position is. And in many of these cases, there have been situations, and I take this from the perspective of somebody who has worked in consular and visa operations that did look at security issues about security transfers. There's a lot of things that are not really security related. They're commercial crimes. Those things are happening quite frequently. We need to watch it, but we need to be careful that the FBI, as Judy has said, Representative Chu has said, and others have said, that you need to be careful of this instructions from them that target the ethnicity before they target the crime. And then you have some people, for example, the Representative Chu mentioned the idea that the Christopher Wray's position that he started, and this was even before they started using the term China Initiative, that there is a serious threat to our security in terms of actual real security, but also in commercial crime. And we need to have, and he used the term, all of society approach to watching it. So what does that mean? That means that everybody should be watching for this. So if you're in a laboratory, or you're in a commercial place, you need to watch out for those people that are potentially taking away security secrets, whether it's commercial secrets or other things. Now, it's one thing to say that if a trained FBI agent or a law enforcement agent is doing that, but to do this all society approach, you're asking your colleague to watch against you. And if that becomes associated with the fact that you look Chinese and therefore you're a potential threat, if FBI agents or trained law enforcement sometimes have difficulty distinguishing that threat, what do you think about some of these guys that have don't know very much at all about Chinese culture history? That's the case that happened in Sherry Chen. That case started because a colleague had thought that her using a certain email process was a threat, because she was talking with relatives or some colleagues in China where she was actually legitimately doing things related to flood control. At the end of the day, her case, as with many of these cases, the FBI, and Ken says this right, they don't have to tell you anything. They don't have to tell you anything, but the process of starting that begins the loss of your security clearance and your ability to get promotions. You stop, people then start choosing, well, I'm not sure if that person is a threat really, but if I have a choice between this guy who is a Chinese guy and this other one, and the FBI has said, watch out for the Chinese guy, then you're not going to advance. You're not necessarily going to promote that person. So you don't know. But the issue here for many of these was really insidious, is you start these investigations and a FBI person comes into your workspace and says, I want to talk to you, even if, or I want you to come with me, and people notice it, right? And things of this sort. And then at the end of the day, after a few weeks, or in some cases a year of investigation, they just let you go. He says, well, we didn't have a case. And that's what happened in a lot of situations during the China issue. They just said, well, we looked at it, we decided there wasn't a case, and we'll let you go. And they don't tell you what initiated. In one case, one professor, there was a concern the FBI was saying they was passing really technological concerns related to the NASA program. And what they eventually found out was that what he was showing to some counterparts, scientists, other counterparts, was a device for hand warming that had been was commercially used and is quite well known. But the arresting FBI people didn't have the scientific knowledge to know that what they were looking at was something that was really common use already. So it's that kind of thing that we have to watch out for. And I would advise also that take a look at things which the Committee 100 is doing. They've been watching and documenting this for these type of arrests, these types of concerns for a while. Again, very much concerned that we know there is commercial crime. We know that there is other potential espionage. That happens in all countries. We have to watch it. So that we say we need to do, but let's be careful that we don't put the ethnicity before the crime, and that is something to watch out for. Committee one, if you ever get approached, Committee Wondering, look at their site. They have some advice on how to handle things.
Hey, Ted. So I think based upon the interest of the audience, that man, perhaps we should have allocated much more time to this topic. But again, we do have Rick coming up with his Rise Against Hate panel, and we're already over. So again, I appreciate the interest of everyone on this topic, and perhaps Rick could run another session after the convention to continue this. Because again, there's so much more than everybody else wants to contribute to. So Melanie, is okay we move on to Rick's portion of the program?
Yes. Rick, are you? I think I see you somewhere. Rick, are you on?
Yes, I'm here, but I was really, I was very intrigued by the conversation that was taking place, and I actually put in the chat that I'd be happy to yield my time if they want to continue this conversation, and perhaps maybe talk about the activities of what I'm doing in terms of combating hate. But I'll leave it to you because I know that there's a break after I speak, and then Kin goes into, I think, a much more detailed process that a chapter has been doing in terms of fighting hate. So, but anyway, I'll leave it up to you guys.
No, I think Rick, because you do have some panelists, and so we would like to hear, what the individuals are doing to combat hate, and we can always continue this conversation, as a webinar in the future.
Yeah, actually, let me just correct you on that. Unfortunately, my panelists weren't able to make it for various reasons. I did end up doing a recording with one particular panelist who I'd love to talk about, who has been quite active in working with us. She herself was a victim, and I thought it'd be something that she had recorded some statements for me. So, and just to also let you know, about 11 a.m. today, I had experienced a brownout and nearly lost some of my my presentation. I was quickly trying to rebuild it. Most of it I can kind of say from memory, but it's not going to be, it may be sort of incomplete. And thanks again to Keilani, our tech support person, for kind of guiding me through and helping me get the presentation ready, or at least the rebuilt presentation.
Will we have to sign off so that Rick's, the people who had planned to attend Rick's can?
No, it's the same Zoom link. Same Zoom link.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. If you like, I'll begin. I was allotted about 45 minutes, but again, because of the modification in the schedule of the panelists, it'd probably be a lot shorter, and then leaves room for questions, or at least give you a little bit more of a break. Anyway, if you don't mind, I'm going to actually stop my video because what happened last time was I lost connection because I guess of the bandwidth. So I'll return, frequently, but I have some slides. So anyway, I just want to say hello, everyone, conventioneers, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are listening. So my presentation is called Rise Against Hate, and it has to do with my involvement in a county-wide initiative that was started several years ago in Los Angeles called LA versus Hate. And this was really the first time that a large metropolis was going to be focusing in this scale. We have 88 incorporated cities in Los Angeles, not to mention 73 suburban neighborhoods. And so we got a lot of territory to cover. one thing that's kind of great about being involved with this endeavor is that it does kind of dovetail to what I've been doing and what we've all been doing in terms of civic engagement and community activism. And I've been, a member of the Alliance for about 14 years. And so I think I have a lot of experience, and I thank a lot of the people here on the call for providing their guidance, wisdom, and expertise on that. So in the 45 minutes roughly that I'm going to kind of provide an overview of what we've been doing, just to give you a sense that the County of Los Angeles is perhaps the most populous county at 10 million in the nation. We are actually larger than Rhode Island and Delaware combined. It's a statistics I always like to sort of like use when I make presentations. With a large concentration of languages and ethnicities, sadly, we also see a significant amount of hate-motivated attacks and aggressions that have been committed nationwide. And they range from, nonverbal slights to hurtful comments to verbal rants and deadly violence. So as I mentioned before, following the break, we're going to hear from our National VP of Membership, San Antonio Lodge's Ken Hui, who will talk in detail about Project No Hate, and that has to do with what San Antonio Lodge had been working with law enforcement, and again, to create agreements that sort of conform to the federal COVID-19 Hate Crime Act. And then Ken will also talk about other things regarding, how to work on grants and actually other opportunities with outreach programs. And again, so you can, if you have any questions, you can leave the chat. You can leave a message in the chat. So next slide, please. So several years ago, LA County Board of Supervisors approved the creation for a program that would be its official effort in addressing hate-motivated aggression that really had been on the rise even before the pandemic and before Asian American Pacific Islanders became frequent targets of racial slurs, taunts, and violence, leading to injury and death, sadly. So LA versus Hate would be that program under the leadership of the Los Angeles County Commission on Human Relations. We describe our endeavor as really community-centered and creative-based. So we have 4 components, as it's listed here: the LA County Commission, which is taking the leadership role. 211 LA, I think most counties in the country have a 211 service, and they are the portal for victims and witnesses to actually report hate crimes or any kind of like forms of biases, discrimination, and bullying. Task Force PR is our marketing agency that we use for doing all sorts of collaterals, all sorts of different outreach. And sadly, one of the things that was corrupted on my panel, on my presentation, were some pictures of some murals and other art happenings that I wanted to show you. And maybe what I can do is later on, they're actually also seen on the LA versus Facebook page, and I posted them on the LA on the CSA National Facebook as well. And then finally, there's Special Service for Groups, which is the organization I work at. And we're a really large health and human services organization with presence not only in Southern California, but Northern California, and we have a few facilities outside the state. So the county chose us to sort of take on what is considered the main sort of outreach unit with LA versus Hate, and it's the Rapid Response Provider Network. Next slide. Thank you. So this is a description about Special Service for Groups. In my role, I actually help oversee what is known as the Rapid Response Provider Network, and it's a number of established service agencies and also nonprofits that do have programs and offer assistance to victims of hate. Next slide will show you the list of who they are, and I'm sure you know some of the name. Can you go ahead and forward, please? There you go. So we have roughly around 14 partners. It's growing, and I'm sure some of these names are familiar with you. The variety of the partners and their expertise really speaks to why it's a perfect sort of arrangement combination for LA County. Some of them are geographically and regionally chosen. Antelope Valley is a very large region. Lancaster, Palmdale is almost like 90-minute drive outside of LA City. So we have a presence up there to represent LA versus Hate, Anti-Defamation League, Asian Americans Advancing Justice LA, the Asian Pacific American Dispute Resolution Center, and of course APCOM, which has been 1/3 of the partnership of the Stop AAPI Violence, and they're located within SSG. So we have a number of these groups that also, are actually addressing some of the anti-Asian hate violence. But I would say that everyone is engaged because if one group or person is hated, everybody is affected. And so this is a very unique assembly of organizations. I'll point out another one, not in our town. It's really not a service provider per se. What they do is they do films and videos and podcasts. And some of these are centered around where communities are addressing hate in their neighborhoods. And they're usually very inspiring. They're shown to like various community groups. We've used them in schools, churches, training in corporate and institutional environments. They're all available. I would like to see even some of these used with some of our CACA chapters and lodges in their efforts. Western Justice Center is in a unique position. They are mainly working on curriculum development and teacher training for an initiative that the county started last year called CSI Community Schools Initiative, where it's using 23 schools as a pilot to reform or create a more holistic approach to teaching. Let me just kind of explain to you sort of like how we operate in terms of how we are connecting victims to services. So it kind of begins with reporting through 211 LA. There are really two paths of entry. They have their live hotline to report hate 24/7. Then if you're dialing by phone, you're going to go through a really good step-by-step instruction in many languages. You just choose a language that is the one that you primarily speak of and feel comfortable talking through. And then the initial responders will mainly ask questions, just get down the general information, making sure that you're okay. If you are injured, then the recommendation is to contact 211. Now, the other path a lot of people end up using is the online search through our database, because sometimes they don't want to talk to a care coordinator on the other side. Sometimes they're just doing research for themselves. And we don't really pressure anyone to we saw that you logged in. Is there anything that we can do for you? So we really respect the individual's privacy. And we send a message to them saying that that's exactly what we do. If you feel that you need our services, please do contact us. So SSG and 211 LA, we conduct regular weekly conferences, and I sit on them because these are cases that have sort of like matured to a new level where we have more detail. There is special circumstances that the victim may need help urgently. And then that urgency might not have been there before, but certainly, after conversations with our care coordinators, and then when we get to our case conferences, we hear that, oh, they really need help. And then we choose the partners that you saw this list here. Really, we kind of like try to dovetail their particular needs with the uniqueness of a crime. And I'll give you a couple examples. So the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of LA, they've been working with the undocumented community in the area. And we might get victims that do not want to disclose their residency status. So it's a sensitive subject, but we still want to connect them with service. And so I may say, well, I'll talk to my contact at Churla, and would you please talk to this individual? I think they may feel more comfortable because they know that that's a population that you're serving. Another would be on this list, APA DRC. I think some of you may know them, the Dispute Resolution Center. So they've gone into schools. They've worked with individual cases as well as group bullying. They work with the administrators, with the parents. Even though their title, their name has Asian Pacific American, they work with all different groups. And I would have to say that that's pretty much with everyone here. Because, for example, if like there is a Asian person that may require our help and they live in Palmdale, Lancaster, then I would connect them with the Antelope Valley Partners for help. It's just more convenient than to try to connect them to surfaces, down here in the LA area. So our care coordinators, as I mentioned, they communicate directly to the LA versus Hate partners. And, some of these cases take a while. They don't resolve overnight. Sometimes the victim stops communicating with us. They become very overwhelmed because maybe their incident has been captured by the media and social media, and they're bombarded with requests to be interviewed. So we've lost some of our the victims who we were counseling because they just became the trauma was still there and it was not helped by the media attention. Now I have to say that some of them do come back, and it could be months. But again, we leave the cases open until by the victim's own consent. Then we close the cases. But I have to say, I mean, some of these cases will probably go on for quite a while. We've seen a lot of not only neighbor to neighbor friction, which I found to be very interesting. A lot of our calls we get are from people who live near each other, maybe live in the same complex or across the way, but they've lived in these the situations for years and did so peacefully until something just kind of like triggered this violent reaction, and it awfully takes on an ugly racial veneer. We've seen that quite a bit in communities in like working class neighborhoods. And obviously I think a lot of it has to do with this sort of crisis we're having with affordable housing. People are really on edge right now, as well as being stuck at home because of the COVID situation, and they have to shelter in place. That's often contributed to sort of like some of these explosions of hate rhetoric. Another one we're seeing a lot of is community scale types of hate acts that involve multiple stakeholders in different cities. I'll give you one example that's actually been publicized. The city of Del Monte. There was an outlier Christian church called the First Works Baptist Church. Now, they were never really part of the mainstream community of the churches in that area, which is very robust and also very connected to the community. This particular church, the pastor would spew out homophobic, misogynistic interpretations of scripture. And I've talked to a few pastors myself, and wanted to get kind of a weigh-in on what his interpretation. But anyway, a groundswell of community supporters for the LGBT community, as well as some of their allies, put together a petition. They basically demanded the city council to kick him out of the city. Now, I don't know if that could actually happen, but there was about 15,000 signatures that were collected, which was remarkable. But we kind of entered into trying to resolve the situation, trying to get all the parties on one table, because we also have to operate on a sense of impartiality. So we need to bring in, if it's possible, all the parties that are involved, including the perpetrators as well as the victims. And obviously, no one wants to actually be confronting the person who's suspected of victimizing them if they could avoid it. But in this case, it didn't happen. The pastor of the church had broke 3 appointments with me. And then he finally said, I don't really need to speak to you. If you want to know what I feel or what the position I have, all you have to do is go to my YouTube page and look at my videos. And I did. And, he pretty much spells it out very clearly. So what happened with this particular case, I don't want to belabor it on this one, but there was a fire in the building that the church uses for its worship. No one was really sure of whether or not it was an incendiary device that was triggered inside or was actually thrown at the church. Nonetheless, the FBI came. We had to go on site. We had to talk to people, make sure. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but it did change the conversation. The church was starting to receive a little bit more sympathy from the community, and we're blaming some of these agitators that may have nothing to do with what the original conflict was, but are just professional agitators, as they're called. So the church finally left because the city condemned the building, and but 10, according to the pastor, about 10 real estate developers that were sympathetic with the church message offered them a space to continue their worship. So they left the city of El Monte, but the case is not over because, along with all this sort of conflict among different community groups and among individuals, there was really no healing process. And so that's what we're working on right now, is to create to build sort of a path. So all the city stakeholders, from the government to, again, this Keep El Monte Friendly coalition that I mentioned to you, to other coalitions, to even some of the faith-based institutions, and also the police. We're trying to get them still to sit down and to kind of come up with a plan. And the plan seems to be where they want to put together a hear commission. So that would give the municipal government sort of like the mandate that, okay, well, this is a very important issue. It's taking place in other cities like San Gabriel, another city in the LA County area, and West Covina. A lot of them are starting this because this is a way where governance and the public and the residents that live in the city could actually interface and address these kinds of issues. So this leads me to like the people that we've been talking with. What I found very positive and inspiring is the number of volunteers, activists, and advocates that have really responded to a lot of these attacks against vulnerable communities. Many are grassroots efforts, friends that get together and they want to do something. Students, as we know, haven't seen, have facilitated a lot of the movement as well. And this gives me a chance. This was a portion where I was supposed to have my panelists come in. But again, I'm just going to bring up one who I think is probably one of the most heroic and caring individuals that really emerged from all this. She herself was a victim, as I mentioned, Hong Lee. Can we move to the next slide, please? Oh, sorry. So this is just some URLs for the 4 different entities that make up LA versus Hate, and I'll put that in the chat. So can we go forward? Thank you. So this is Hong Lee. Last year, exactly 1 year ago, she was at a restaurant in near downtown LA, and she was ordering her lunch. She works for affordable. She's an affordable housing coordinator, so she is in the area. So a gentleman had approached her and asked her if they wanted to have lunch, and she politely declined because she was married and with 2 kids. So this gentleman became hostile, even though he started to spew racial epithets towards her and approached her menacingly, and she was sort of like cornered. She pleaded for help from the restaurant staff and other patrons. Finally, some of the restaurant staff assisted into getting the guy to leave because they gave him some food. But then he came back several other times, and then finally the police came to sort of like take the report. Her story doesn't end there. For several days, again, this is her. We've become friends, and actually, we kind of knew each other through other people. So that's why she came and spoke to me initially, and not had gone through the 211 channel. But she was feeling, obviously traumatized. I am not a trained, social work, master's in social work, but I'm surrounded by a lot of them, and I start asking questions to identify what trauma is for a hate victim. And she started exhibiting a lot of that, a lot of like fear of like going out. And mind you, we were on sort of the rising tide of the COVID pandemic. And so a lot of people were very fearful and, entertained things that were possible threats to their own safety and her family. But when she posted the video that she took on Instagram, it just created sort of a mountain of support. People were writing her and saying, we feel for you. Our thoughts are with you. If you need someone to talk, and some people are offering if you need food. And she was so inspired by this sort of care that, she said, look, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pay it forward and help other people and tell them about my story and inspire them to, talk about it as she has now done. So if we go to, there are 4 questions that I asked her to do, and I didn't want to play it in video because there'll be some parts of the conversation that you're going to hear, like we were talking about our favorite lobster dishes. So I didn't really want to put that in there. But in any case, if you can go to the next slide.
Yes, I'm going to stop sharing really quickly just to optimize the sharing for audio.
Okay, thank you. And a big shout out to Keelalani for helping me sort of have audio associated with this video. I mean, with the next 4 slides. So I'll just again, the question is, we were just past the 1-year anniversary of the incident where she was a victim of racial aggression. So I asked her, well, what are your thoughts about the event that helped shape your life significantly, and now you're this activist against hate and a really popular advocate for safeguarding our communities. Should I click on it or thank you.
Honestly, when the incident occurred last year, it was the single most horrific thing that has ever happened to me. And I never imagined I would be sharing the video with the world to see, especially with the most embarrassing moment of my life, where I was crying in the video and had the most horrific racial slurs said towards me and sexist remarks. And I never knew that just by sharing the video, it would start me on this advocacy journey. And this week marks the 1-year anniversary of the incident. And as I look back to everything that has happened this past year, after sharing the video of the assault, 5 other victims came forward. The case has now been escalated to the city attorney's office for review to see if they can press charges. And I somehow became the ambassador for the LA versus Hate Initiative, a partner with Asians American Advancing Justice and Stop AAPI Hate, and very recently started to form the nonprofit Seniors Fight Back, where we just started training seniors on how to defend themselves if they ever find themselves a victim of hate. So that includes anything from situational awareness to body language to using their voice command to be able to deter the person from attacking them. And this single incident has changed my course of life. I never pictured myself as an activist or an advocate for other victims, but here I am 1 year later, and I have the honor and privilege of helping other victims.
Okay, thank you. Go on to question 2, please. So you have become a leader who has been able to encourage other victims of hate to seek assistance and speak out. What have you found as effective in convincing those who may be scared or reluctant?
When I meet with other victims, I share my story so that way they can also relate to what I went through as well. And I tell them the importance of speaking up and reporting. Like in my case, if I didn't share the video, all of the other victims would have continued to suffer in silence. But by sharing the video, reporting to the police, getting the hate incident report, and also sharing the video on social media, and then publicly speaking about it on local, national, and global platforms, other people were able to see the video and recognize the man from my incident. And so that's why it's so important that if we ever experience any type of hate, that we speak up and we report, because chances are you may not be the only victim. And in my case, there were 5 other victims that came forward.
Thanks. Excuse me. Next, please. Tell us about, again, I'm sorry. This is what happened when my presentation got corrupted. So it's that the organization actually is Seniors Fight Back. So tell us about Seniors Fight Back. What was the impetus that inspired you to focus on the safety of our senior population?
This year in 2021, we saw a huge surge in increase of attacks against our elderly. Everything from seeing our seniors be lit on fire, having acid thrown on them, having their faces slashed, being robbed at gunpoint in front of their very house. And that made us want to form our nonprofit, Seniors Fight Back, because we want them to be able to defend themselves. In our culture, Asians value their elderly. They're put on a pedestal. They're always the first one to eat. We're always bowing to them. We have the utmost respect for our seniors. And when we see them get attacked, it's heartbreaking, because we all picture that to be our grandparents, our mother, our father, our aunts, our uncles. And so it just hits us really hard. So a group of us made up of 10 volunteers decided to form this Seniors Fight Back in order to offer free self-defense classes. And we're not trying to make anybody become professional fighters, MMA fighters. We're just teaching them the basic tools. For example, the first tool that our instructor teaches is situational awareness. When you go outside, know who's around you, who's behind you, who's in front of you, know your closest exit. Just be aware. And as you can see in these videos that we continue to see, a lot of the times our elders are looking at their phones, they're looking elsewhere, they have a book in their hand, they have a magazine in their hand, they're not attentive. So that's what we're teaching them. The second thing we teach is also body language. You can see that sometimes people are just looking down at the ground, they're not paying attention, and all of a sudden someone comes up and shoves them or pushes them over. If you carry yourself and as you're looking around, you're also being attentive of what's going on around you, you are less likely to become a victim. And number 3, we also teach how to use your voice command. You can scream anything at the top of your lungs. And the reason why is because we're not used to hearing people scream. Even if others don't come to help you, at least you know that others are watching and that hopefully deter the person from attacking you. And we also teach very, very light self-defense techniques, such as a groin kick, an elbow, just something very basic. And during our sessions, we're not expecting the seniors to remember everything that's taught. But if they can remember at least just one thing from the class, then it's worthwhile for them. And that could possibly save their lives or to make sure that situation doesn't escalate.
Okay, the final question. So you once told me you wanted your 2 young boys to be proud of you. You certainly have teachable moments in your experience, and it's great to see your husband and kids supporting your activism. What and how should young people do to create a world that is more compassionate, more tolerant, more civil?
I think that everything starts at home. It starts with your upbringing. It starts with how you are raised. And in my case, my husband and I are doing everything in our power to make sure that our toddlers grow up in a world where they are colorblind to race. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter what your religion is, your sexual orientation. All of that is irrelevant at the end of the day because we all bleed red. And end of the day, we're all human beings and we need to treat each other with love and respect. And as you can see in our Seniors Fight Back classes, we have had a lot of even teenagers and high school students come out to try to volunteer for our events. And it's very heartwarming to see because they're learning at a very young age to how to give back to their community. And I believe the organization is called Next Generation. But we have 4 volunteers that have come out to our last 2 events in Cerritos and in Los Angeles. And it brings me a lot of joy to see that they're there, they're translating, they're speaking to their elders in their own native language so they understand what's going on. And that's what I hope for our children, to be able to see that and want to help to make a difference. And hopefully by the time the next generation gets older, they're able to learn from all the mistakes that we made during our upbringings, and they're able to learn how to love and be compassionate to one another.
Okay, thanks. So again, Hong has been, I think, probably the one premier ambassador for us. She's been very proactive. She actually would help locate victims of hate and convince them to come and talk to us. She's also inspired other movements to have people stand up in their communities. And there are many creative ways. We certainly are a resource because of what we can offer in terms of collateral, marketing collateral, some funding, and connections with different stakeholders in government, and also with corporations. The corporate world as well. So next slide. Now I'll be back on. So I put together a list here that I normally would for different organizations that I have to speak at. There are a lot of hate tracking mechanisms out there, hate reports that are submitted to the following organizations. But really, the distinction of Ally versus Hate is that not only do we take the reports, and again, we work with these groups too to look at the reports and make sure that there are, we'll look at contrasts and parallels in the data. But we're the only ones that are really offering connection to services, not just with what the county has, such as the Department of Employment and Housing and the Department of Health Services, but we connect them with the services that are offered from our network partners that I showed early on. But really, this has been an effort that involves the whole community. I think the one thing too that my takeaway in the work is that yes, we look at the social media, we listen to the news, and we hear about all these hate acts that are taking place, and we shake our heads and wonder, what motivates people to do this, and especially in this time. But yet it's definitely always offset by the incredible support, the widespread support that we get from the community, who I think we all realize that we may not be able to end hate in our lifetime. I mean, there's definitely philosophical arguments about that, but at least we're trying to build that sort of backbone, that support service to connect victims so they can get better, and that's very critical, to the public safety and the wellness of the community. So next slide. So I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to sort of give a little bit of overview, and I do apologize for some of the mess ups. I would blame technology and the natural world, but I'm owning up to the fact that it happened to me, and hopefully the other speakers that I wanted to bring in, Compassion SGV was one group that had started doing chaperone services for seniors and escorting them where they're going to the market, doctor appointments, or just simply, their evening walks. And the other person is a young lady named Esther Young Lim, who basically created these how to report a hate crime booklets in many different languages. You'll find them in major cities now. She took the time to work with translators and also modeled the questions that are on the LAPD website, and that's sort of a model that a lot of other organizations use if they have mechanisms to take the reports. And it's just incredible how these tools have been really so helpful, because as we know, not everyone has access to the digital technologies or are literate in using them, and sometimes it's a simple booklet that becomes the most effective solution. So anyway, I thank you very much. I went 3 minutes over, but you still have some time to grab lunch. Or does anyone have any questions? If you want, we can talk later. You have my contact information. If there's any information you might need specifically about some things I talked about, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Rick. I want to thank, all the panelists. I think today's talk was very thought-provoking, and it gives us a lot to think about and direction for the future. And it's important for all of us to take place, and it's all different levels, how we can make a difference, right? As individuals, as part of a bigger community. And so, you're going to hear a little more from Ken about, the work he's going to be doing with law enforcement in a few minutes. So I want to give everyone an opportunity to take a short break. We'll take a break until 12:30, at which point we will come back and Ken will talk about San Antonio Lodge and Project No Hate. That will be a different Zoom link, so we'll sign out of this and you will need to sign into the next Zoom link. I just want to mention that, there's a lot of stuff on the chat about, talking about racial profiling in the government and how we can advocate against that. And, we need to kind of look at how we can be a bigger part of that and what is our role with CACA. So we definitely will be taking that on as initiative for the upcoming years. So anyways, take a break, get something to eat, and we'll see everybody back in about 10 minutes.